What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to Finance with Parks. In today's video, we're going to talk about the US government going bankrupt. That's right, we have hit the debt ceiling. We're out of money. What does it mean? How did we get here? Let's talk about it all. Welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, please consider subscribing. We talk all things personal finance, and today we're going to talk about the government's finances. And spoiler alert, they're worse than any bank account you could imagine. So, as some of you may have heard in the news, we have hit the debt ceiling of $31.5 trillion. That's how much the US is in debt. This number right here, I don't even think you can fathom how much that is, but that is the US debt. And so in today's video, we're going to talk about how did we get here, how do we fix it, if possible, and just understanding everything there is to know about the national debt ceiling crisis that we're in now. All right, so going back to this screen here, so this is what we're in debt. The reason we got here, the reason we have 31.5 trillion in debt is very simple. The US government is spending more money than they're making. Just like you in a normal bank account, right? If you're spending more money than your income, you are going to be in debt. You're going to have credit card bills. You're going to have loans. You're going to rack up interest. It is not a good way to treat your finances, and that's where the government has gotten. So just the fiscal year alone, they've spent 5.9 or plan to spend $5.9 trillion. The deficit just for this period alone is almost 1.4 trillion. Insane amounts of money. And so if you see here, okay, well, this is the money they're spending. Where's the money they're making? So this is where you get that $1.3 trillion deficit or 1.4 trillion deficit. Is the money that they're making is coming from taxes. The US government's main revenue generator is income taxes and corporate taxes. Those are the two big main drivers. So the taxes you pay to the federal government, that's coming up in April of this year, and also corporations. So that income was 4.6 trillion. Now that is broken down into your income tax brackets, the payroll tax, corporate tax, and then tariff tax revenue. So this is how the federal government is making their money to somewhat afford the 6 trillion that they're spending. And so here are the largest budget items. Where is all that spending coming from? The first one is Medicare and Medicaid, 1.5 trillion. Social Security, 1.25 trillion. Defense, the government military spending, 775 billion. And then the interest on the debt. This is the one that's most concerning right here. It is the fourth largest line on the budget this year, is just the interest alone that's accruing on the $31.5 trillion. Pretty soon here, that's going to be all the money they have to spend, is just paying off interest. And so that's why this cycle is so alarming, and the place that we're in now is very concerning, because shoot, eventually this interest is just going to eat us alive, and that's all we'll be paying off. We won't have money to spend on anything else. And so that's understanding the debt, but let's talk a little bit further, around how did we get here? So look at this trend of the deficit by year. This is the year over year, not a cumulative version. But so the last time the government actually turned a profit, was in 2001. It's been 22 years. It's just embarrassing. Imagine you talking about your personal bank account being like, yeah, it's been 20 years since I've made more than I've spent. I don't know how I'm not just totally bankrupt yet, but somehow we've just continued to spend more money than we have. Here we are. So now, how have we been able to spend? How has the US government been able to spend like banshees and rack up this amount of debt? Well, it's because this is who we owe. There are US investors that are continuing to give the US government money. And that is in the form of treasury bills, treasury notes, treasury bonds, etc. So if you look here, there are your types of debt and who do we owe. So many of them are everyday people that own these bonds. That's what's so concerning, is if they default on the debt, we are screwed. There will be so many people that have money that basically lent it to the US government with the intention that they would pay back interest and then pay back the principal. And if the US government can't pay those loans, the US investors are left held out to dry. Now, if you come down the rest of this list, you'll notice some other big country names actually carry a lot of the US debt. They were buying a lot of these treasury bonds, etc. Japan, I was very surprised to see that Japan actually owns more debt than China. A lot of you may have heard in the news that China owns a big portion of the US debt, which is true. 1.1 trillion, it's not a small number, but Japan actually owns more. I thought it was very interesting. So these are the people that have gone out and bought these types of bills and notes from the government. And so going back to the debt ceiling now, this is the trend of our total debt over time. So not just the year-over-year deficits. It's a little outdated because it was last updated in September. You can see we're at 30.9 trillion. And so to be clear, Congress has to approve a debt ceiling that we are not allowed to exceed. And that was the $31.4 trillion set in mid-December 2021. We've surpassed that. We are over the debt limit. And so now, technically, the US government is essentially bankrupt. I mean, it's insane that we've gotten to this point. And so so Janet Yellen came out and basically said they are going through extraordinary measures before this debt ceiling gets raised again to avoid defaulting on all of those treasury bills and notes that we showed in the previous slide. But we are that close. And so now Congress basically has to vote to increase the ceiling limit. We can go from 31.4 trillion to 35 trillion. Who knows what the new number is going to be, but all this is kicking the can down the road and just making the problem worse. That's what we're doing. We're kicking the can. We're going to make it someone else's problem because eventually we're going to get to the point, like I said, where that ceiling limit is going to be so high that the debt on the borrowing alone is going to be the entire budget. You're not going to have anything left to spend because it's all going to be paying off interest on this debt. And so that would mean a demand for the dollar would drop. That would have global economy impacts. This could be a whole 2-hour separate video as to what would happen if we do go bankrupt, but we'll just leave it at those two because it's unprecedented. It's never happened before. Congress has always raised the debt ceiling. However, the rubber is going to meet the road at some point. And so that gets us into our final slide. How do we fix this? It's very simple on paper. There's 2 levers we have here. This equation is very simple. You have spending and you have your income. So you either decrease your spending or you increase taxes. And honestly, neither of those are a very good solution, especially the increase in taxes. Obviously, now when April comes up, you're going to spend a lot of your paycheck, if it hasn't been taken out already, going to the federal government. And so if they have to raise income, though, to try and pay off this debt, they're going to increase taxes. Decrease in spending, as we've seen, that doesn't seem like an option that the government wants to go through. They have obviously done a horrible job of cutting spending because, as you've seen in the last 3 years, we've had a huge increase in the deficit year over year. And unfortunately for politicians running on a platform that says decreasing spending, you have to cut military budgets. You have to cut Social Security. You have to cut Medicare and Medicaid. And those are not words that politicians like to run on. But unfortunately, someone's going to have to do it at some point, one of these 2 options, or it will be bankrupt. Hopefully that video is helpful to kind of give you a high-level overview. I know it's a complicated topic, but if that did help you, if you could smash the like button and subscribe to the channel, that'd be greatly appreciated. Again, we talk all things personal finance. Thanks again for watching. Remember, finance is fun. See ya.